Oh, we. Hello. Hold on. I got music in my headphones and it's like weirding me out. Turn it way down. There's interesting noises in the neighborhood today. I don't know if they'll pick up on my mic, but there's like, I don't know. There's some construction, some children crying, all explainable, but still, when it all adds up together, it's just like for a winter or a late fall day, mid fall day, it's kind of noisy and happenings. What's up, everyone? I'm gonna work a little bit. I was just gonna work live, kind of. I think sometimes that motivates me a little bit more. Oh, I told you guys yesterday I've been messing with TM, Transcendental Meditation. I've been keeping it up, and whatever. It's only a day later. I did it today too. Still like it, fine, whatever. I think I'm doing it wrong, but yeah, today was still kind of weird. Like I woke up at 6 planning to go work out, and I did TM because you're supposed to do that right when you wake up. And then I was just so tired still that I went back to bed. Woke up then, and then still a little groggy. Did a little bit of work, and then was like, "Shit, I should work out because I don't want to miss that." So then I went to work out. Then I took a nap. Then I did TM again in the afternoon, and that's almost where I am now. And now I'm finally like my day. I don't know what was going on. I think I have been kind of accidentally burning the candle up both ends just a little bit. Not even that crazy, but just staying up a little bit later, getting up a little bit earlier all week, not taking naps. And then it catches up to you eventually. 6 people watching. How's it going, everyone? And then, as always, the streams. I like to let people know. Hotel Story. We've been getting some backers. Look at that. See, 199. That's awesome. They continue to trickle in a little steady little pace. I always wonder once it slows down, I'm like, it's over. We're never going to get another backer. No one's ever going to read my work again. Might as well throw in the towel. And this, as you're saying that, you'll get like 2 or 3 backers, and you're like, oh, I guess people are still out there. The readers are out there. They take their time back, and people, they can't and don't want to, nor should they have to back right away. That's the whole point of keeping Hotel Story open for 4 months. We're going to keep it open for 4 months to let everyone know, just like this is a big chance, big opening chance to grab it. It it deserves that respect on my end of giving it the extra time. Whereas even, I guess, not to say that like Grand Prix was the one right previous that I did really fast. It was only available for like 3 weeks total. And in those 3 weeks, it raised like 22 grand, which, that's pretty good for how fast it was. But people do squeeze it in if they can. So it's not like it would have gotten destined to be that much higher. That was just a double issue. It's not like a big trade. But that one, because those are getting released relatively fast, there will be a big long one for people to catch up with that, but it will be like next year. But part 2 of that of Grand Prix is going to crowdfund probably before Hotel Story fulfills, even because Hotel Story will still be in that grace period of 4 months where we're just trying to get everyone to get a chance to back it. And then Grand Prix will be done within that period. So then Grand Prix will launch. So it'll be a rare occasion where I have 2 campaigns open at the same time. But also an interesting thing to note about that is both campaigns will have all the art completely done. So that's always kind of good. 9 people watching. What's up? Crystal McGee, how's it going? Gnarl's going to light a trash can fire for warmth. I got a heater, but I've just been using it here and there. I don't know. I like the excuse of wearing comfortable coats indoors, but it can become too ridiculous. And actually, one time, frickin' for a period of my life, the crazy shit that I went through to try and be a professional artist. For a while, I was living in Iowa City in a basement, so it was like an apartment, but I was in the basement. And there's a story even for that, for why I was in the basement, but it wasn't that terrible. It was cold and wet, but it was cold and wet upstairs too. But yeah, so just in this basement, but it was winters in Iowa are so bad. I think we might have even had the heater going or whatever. I might have had a space heater sort of nearby, but it would get so cold that you could see your breath. And I had to wear gloves while I was drawing on my tablet. So then I just like had no exposed skin, or else I would like get my fingers would get numb. And as I'm saying that, I'm like, that's almost an issue when it gets that cold. You got to worry about condensation in the morning, because you'll actually your interior house will be colder than the dew point. I think it's something like, is that how the science works? I don't know where. So you'll actually get the condensation uh that like grass and everything gets in the morning, that's always damp. That's like, they call that the dew point. It's the morning dew. But if you get cold enough indoors, then the morning dew happens in your house. And that's like when like wood rots and shit like that and whatever. But that wasn't happening. So it couldn't have been that cold. But there was one time when I was living there that uh I had been drawing all night and sleeping all day. Randomly did that for various periods of time, almost on like a cyclical schedule, like because I was on like a 25-hour schedule. So my times of being awake would kind of just cycle around, and eventually I would sleep for 24 hours to kind of catch up. Um, but I woke up one day, I had slept all day. So now it was like 5 or 6 and it was pitch black, and it had been storming the entire time I was sleeping, and the entire basement had flooded. So it had flooded pretty bad too, like 6 inches or something. Like a couple of my boxes of books got destroyed. And so I stepped out off of my bed, and it's freezing cold too. So I had, no matter what, I had to get wet, really wet feet to decide even what to do. And I didn't know what to do, and I didn't know anyone in Iowa City. I knew one guy, and I called him, and he didn't answer. So I went for a walk, I think, and was just like very much like, what the fuck is going on? And I don't remember what happened. I think I just kind of dealt with it, and then whatever, the water did drain eventually, and the basement dried up a little bit, and then just back to normal kind of. That was like a really bullshit little 24 hours period. So let me share real fast. I got the Armored Core 6 music ever so slightly in my earphones. Hotel Story. You guys know, but I'm just letting you know it's out there. But yeah, look at that. It's like $199. So close to 200. Does anyone watching want to be the 200th backer? Should I offer anything special to the 200th backer? I could. It might have already happened as I've been talking. No, we're still due for the 200th. I could give an NFT to the 200th. Comic book was comic book Supwall. I've heard Ethan pronounce your name Comic Book One. Comic book. Comic Book One. I think I'll just pronounce it that way. How's it going? How's it going, Dawg? Jimmy Rays, what's up, man? Camel Moon, what's up? Narwhal lives in an IKEA. That's like we were talking about that a little bit last night. What is it called? The back rooms. My house isn't that creepy. The back wall does look clean right now. Like bare. Kind of like recently bought. Romy, what's up? 18 people watching. Thanks everyone for being here. We're just hanging out. I'm gonna work a little bit. Yeah. 1 second. Comic Book One says Ethan is never wrong. Well, he famously is the one who coined the concept of even calling me Narwhal. By the way, Narwhal. Speaking of Narwhal, that's me opening up an eBay store very soon, probably next week. And it'll be, I want to treat it, even though it is just like a regular eBay store, I'm going to treat it with a little bit of fancy fare or whatever you call it. Like I might do like a launch stream and be like, yay, eBay store. But it is kind of fun. I jumped through a handful of hoops to make it possible. And with the help of Richard Lasura, who he's running it, and he lives across the country, but I mailed him 200 pounds of stuff, and he's doing it on his end, taking a cut, but and then he's running the store, and the 200 pounds is like 10 copies of every book I've ever done, and then a bunch of slightly rarer stuff, and then some odds and ends, I think. And but some of the rare stuff is kind of fun too. I'm trying to think what there was. There was a few collected, like it might have been 10 even. They're the last of them that I have of the Narwhal sketchbooks, because there was 3 I did total, and they each featured 22 pages of Nosferatu. So in the end, it completed the first version of the Nosferatu story was kind of published just in those sketchbooks, and there was only about 200 of those ever printed, maybe 250 printed, and then the backer number might have been 200. So I had like 50 extra, and they've slowly depleted over the years. But now it was down to 10 of each left, and so I sent those to Richard too. So someone can pick those up. Those will be listed. Foreign agent, anyone that of the books that are now, it's been several years since they were released, and so some people have like missed them and want to catch up on some Narwhal, but they haven't been available. The eBay store will make that possible. Matthew Clark, that's awesome. It'll be good for new people to catch up on your stuff quickly. Exactly. Yeah, thanks, Matthew Clark. Romy, hotel story, A Night of Smoke and Mirrors at Hotel Constantinople. Yeah, what about what I was gonna say? Alex BRB had a kind of fun pitch for Hotel Story, and he hasn't read it, but he just like wrote it, and I was like, that's awesome. Anything that'll like maybe entice a click, I'm always curious about. Like, there's like the sales and psychology of it, but there's one that it said like a hotel bathed in blood, Hotel Story, something like that. I was like, oh yeah, yeah. I mean, there's a lot of blood in the story, so we could. It's not a lie. He's not lying. Student of God, your take on Ghost Machine comics? Yeah, I almost do have a little take. I was thinking, not to be so. Yeah, again, I'm of two minds, and I'll do the slightly more negative one first, I guess. But the slightly more negative one, I was like, oh great, all the cowardly old white dudes who freaking let the industry die finally left like rats leaving a sinking ship, started their own little deal, whatever. I'm almost like not that interested in that generation that ruined, because even though they didn't technically ruin, it was like the SJWs that ruined. But then there was these dudes that were there the whole time, that were like, when we were saying stuff, they were joining on the dog pile against us, or even staying. If I don't know if they were staying quiet or whatever they were doing. All that is like still like super annoying to the point where I don't care about them. But then I'm curious what they'll do too. And it is like a step, obviously, I guess, in the right direction. It's like a step of healing. I don't know if I don't know if you'd say, yeah, I guess it would be like any step is a step in the right direction, because we want to try as many things as we can. So that's more the positive spin. I actually a little bit like that also is right in the same category, kind of as like Frank Miller and Dan Didio doing the same thing, starting their own kind of company. I think they might be publishing kind of through Image, but they're the new imprint. So it's like Image becoming this umbrella for all the rats leaving the sinking ship, starting their own imprints. But that's not necessarily a bad thing. And I guess one thing that it boils down to too is it's something that Mark Miller says is like, it's the old legends that can save the industry. They need to kind of come back and save it. And this is sort of that happening. But then I almost have like a critique on that statement, is like, I actually don't think it's the old legends that are going to save it, because they kind of let it die. Like, they can't save it. I think it's young people that can save it, like me. And I will, and I am. Just buy it back, Hotel Story. Uh, yeah, the normies have left them. The woke have fallen. next Marvel and DC fire everyone we hate. Um, yeah, yeah. I think so, maybe, which is interesting if we're getting out of the woke. I was. It's always. It is interesting to try and define woke still, even the because it's like the imaginary conversation you have with a normie, because I think they're still out there, even where they're like, what, wokeness isn't that bad, what are you talking about, it's always, things have always been woke. Someone was saying that, oh yeah, we were talking about that, about Why the Last Man, and we just had to think about it a little bit more, and it's like, you're like, at first thought Why the Last Man was woke back in the day, and nobody noticed, and it was good, so it's like an example of things that could be woke, but it was still really good. But then if you think about it a little bit more, it's like, no, they actually, that one, they tried to remake it and they almost couldn't. They had to change it to make it actually woke. So woke is always like a step beyond what you would think of what the reasonable. So like, a story like a feminist story about women surviving and men dying because of the chromosomes, that's actually not woke. Woke would never allow that because of the chromosome thing. To be woke, it would have to allow for transgender type stuff or whatever identity, and they just kind of wouldn't tell that story about it. Anytime science would be tied to gender, they would never allow that. So that's like an interesting level where woke will take stuff that you can kind of draw the distinction. The other thing is like it's very politically correct. And that's just, and maybe you could say humorless. I don't know. Uh, but yeah, because I don't know. There's a few people I follow on Twitter that are like hilarious, and I wonder what their deal is. Like because they're not right wing at all. They're like left wing. But I'm like, I don't think they're woke. I think they kind of make fun of woke a little bit, but a lot of their audience is woke. So they kind of, I'm trying to think who I'm even thinking of. Like Beetle Moses. Like I like him a lot. I'm a huge fan of Beetle Moses. All his comics make me laugh. I saw him do a tweet once. He was kind of just making fun of people being political in general, which, yeah, that's kind of like, I'm okay with that. That's probably the best, in some ways, the best way to go. I don't know. But that's what I'm curious. That's what I'm like paranoid about, is like, is there actually like a third path of people who've flown above the entire thing, been hilarious the whole time, kept their audience, not alienated it, and not had to engage in the culture war, and not been pulled back by political correctness? Because sometimes like those kind of people, they could almost like gaslight you if you were saying like, oh, political correctness has gotten out of control and everyone's self-censoring and it's affecting art. Then they'd be like, that's not true, there's plenty of good art. I don't, even my stuff, I don't self-censor. And for them that's true, but it's also like, no, like, I don't know, what do they call that? That's called survivor's bias. Sometimes it's like the sample that they pull from, even in that case of their own experiences, being someone who like did pull it off, someone who was successful in that space of like navigating that crazy world. That's such a small sample size that if they comment on the larger thing, then they're in danger of kind of gaslighting other people's experience. But I do think the broader situation of it's kind of the secondary thing, that it's the self-censorship that is the most negative thing that comes from a lot of it regarding art, basically. Another one where I feel like I can sort of get gaslit, because I feel like I'd be like, yeah, we're in an era where movies are pretty much, not even pretty much, movies are the worst they've ever been. TV's the worst it's ever been. Maybe slightly better shape than movies. Movies are in the worst shape right now. Video games aren't doing too well either. Like everything's bad. The comic book industry's dying. The indie scene is like better, but um even it, like, you got to give it an asterisk, because it's kind of like, that will be a situation where it well, this is something your boy Zach said too. Is like, what percentage books in the indie sphere are someone's first book? Like, he's like, if it's your first book, it's probably not going to be competing with the mainstream, even in the mainstream in its like lower worst state. It might be beating it like in a lot of ways, but it won't be destroying it, kind of thing. And it's like that's kind of a high percentage. But those people, they will be producing stuff to like actually make good, like the truly a new era, age era would come like 10 years down the line when those people are on their like 10th book or whatever. But it was an interest that's like interesting statistic. It's like a lot of people doing their first book, which is encouraged and awesome. But it's like that will not be where the golden age comes from. It will come from secondarily from that down the line, but not specifically that. Some of it, what it is too, is it's like people fulfilling their dream of always doing a book, and that's kind of like there's two categories, and each one is good. There's pros and cons, but this is something that so there's like two paths in life kind of for an artist. One is where you jump in the deep end right away, live in squalor as you try and figure it out, sink or swim. You're working minimum wage day jobs, but you're staying up late at night and working on your comics or writing or whatever. That's basically what I did. But then I wasn't even super focused in my 20s. I was drinking and partying a lot, which I sort of regret, but it does whatever. It's I don't know. Um and then the other path is like you whatever, go to school, become a lawyer, retire when you're 40 with a nest egg of $100,000 that you can invest into a comic if you want. You then write your first comic. You've loved comics all your life, and you can do it that way. And even that way, I feel like if it's your first comic, it's not going to be this golden age welcoming in thing. Um, but that doing that path, it might be like, yeah, second, third comic could start to get there where you're like throwing your hat in the ring to like try and save the industry kind of. I think one of the ways the industry gets saved though is comics becoming cool again. And I don't even know exactly how that happens. I know you definitely got to make really good comics, obviously. Um, the one when I do think of that, I'm like, forget like quality and whatever, good writing, good art. What are like the coolest comics ever? Just try and think like not even thinking about art because some of these they might not even be like the highest that you'd rate if you rate art and writing and stuff. I think Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and Sin City are like the top two, maybe. And I'm curious to chat. Let me know what you think too. Like disregarding art and writing, and obviously the art and writing have to be like pretty good, or else it just wouldn't be cool. But it wouldn't be like the selling point. The selling point is the X factor of how cool it is, and maybe it's the timing sometimes too. Like I don't know about the timing of each of those if they came out like kind of like when they were needed, somehow. And I don't know about also the delay with Sin City. There was a little delay where like, yeah, it got released, but 10 years later, people are passing it to each other on campuses. They're giving college students are giving each other copies saying you got to read this, it'll blow your mind. And then right around then, it's like blossoming into the moment or whatever. What do they call that? The lightning in a bottle is happening, like a delayed effect almost. That's when it gets a movie made of it by Robert Rodriguez. And so that was like a 10-year thing of it gestating. Turtles might have had something like that, but it almost feels like Turtles was a lot faster. And then if it's super fast, I do get skeptical. I'm like, was the satanic system involved somehow in this? Like, what do they do when they speed that shit up? When they like even when Sean Gordon Murphy launched Zorro, he immediately gets like press releases from Screen Rant and IGN and blah blah blah. I'm like, that is like the that force. I don't like that force. Like that force is like a tilting hand. Um, especially I don't know when it's like if you're whatever D's he's sucking to get the Screen Rant press release, which ends up not resulting in any sales anyway. But whatever, like, he has to sign a contract in blood metaphorically, whatever he's doing, or going through massive if they have to do that. If they have to plug into the satanic system a little bit, and then yeah, they get their little boost, and the hands tilt, and the hands could tilt even more, and that's when you're like, why is this person famous? What's happening? Like Timothy Chalamet, you're like, what's going on? Um, but I don't know if like there's a new era where you can work around that a little bit. And I'm like, did Sin City, did Turtles work around that? Do comics? Maybe that's one fun thing about comics is they almost are the most armed thing, well armed thing to circumvent the satanic system. Where yeah, they're picking their little thing who's going to be the star of the year or the item of the week, and it's always going to be like modern in some way. It's always going to push some dumb agenda, and it's going to get all the satanic forces behind it of like getting us to click on it and getting us to think it's cool and buy it, and maybe whatever you get like a blurb from Stephen King on the back saying the dawn of a new era, the young gun punk writer is here and he has replaced me. That's like a Stephen King thing he would say. And you're like, well shit, I'll read this, whatever. And you're like, oh, this is propped up from some satanic deal. Somebody did some dick sucking for this, or somebody signed something in blood, because this does not deserve to be propped up the way it is. What's going on? That's another way where you can measure, like, if you're in a shitty era of art, shit kind of needs to get propped up to even like survive. So, and they're kind of picking and choosing, not randomly, but yeah, for propaganda purposes almost more than good art purposes. Whereas yeah, like it's a lot more free flowing, a lot more embarrassment of riches in a good era where it's almost like a numbers game. Like in the 70s, you could watch a random 70s movie and it will be good because they were all good back then. Some were better than others. And then at that point, that I think that was almost like pre satanic system, almost maybe that'd be interesting. There's a dude on Twitter, I can't remember his deal. Um, but he calls it Hollywood Esoterica or something is like his book, and he knows all the history and all like the secret societies and the CIA involvement with Hollywood and when that was happening and the various agendas that they did try and push over the years here and there. And that stuff is all kind of interesting, but it is like I don't know. It's like if the art's good, some of that doesn't matter. Like I'll take a little Satanism with my good art. I don't care. But when the art gets bad and then you gotta have Satanism too, I'm like, shit. I don't want no fucking bad art with my Satanism. I'll tolerate a smidgen of Satanism if you give me some good art, like the 70s or whatever. And I guess just to be clear too, like the 70s had satanic movies like about Satanism. That's different. That's not what I'm talking about. That's like a subgenre of horror and that's fun. But like actual Satanism is like when they plug and you're getting famous for no reason and then you owe them kind of thing. And they do have a system like that. And there is like human sacrifice involved and shit, but either possibly on a more metaphorical level, but I think it's not metaphorical. I think it's literal. Turtles was very much Miller inspired. Independent creativity is the pinnacle. Video games became stagnant. Same shit with different paint job, like movies just cosplay. Yeah, and we're kind of there right now. Like that's one where it's a little bit hard to see the way out too. Like comics, I can kind of at least envision like a bunch of good comics I want to make, so I at least like have a path. But video games, that's like a blind path. Like someone at some point might make a like what Resident Evil 4 was at the time when it came out, it kind of like blew minds. Like, but they invented that over the shoulder shooter thing that everyone does even to this day now. Like putting the camera where it does, zooming it in a little bit more when you aim and you go over the shoulder. That was all felt really good and it was really fun. They invented that like from scratch. Same with Mario 64. They kind of invented 3D movement from scratch and it was perfect. And they're still almost using that. But maybe some of the stuff is like VR. They'll get some some kind of shit going, but I'm not too interested in that. I don't know. Oh, one thing about video games is in the 90s, it was like a team of 5 people working for a year could make an awesome game like Doom or Quake. And now that is like impossible except for indies again. But then that's still a little bit of a situation like, well, a Quake clone, like as cool as that kind of is, I just don't care that much. But yeah, to make like a new crazy game, it costs a lot of money, a lot of people working for more than a year. That's just kind of interesting. Speaking of video games too, that you can try and think back on like what were the games that like hit that cool level where it was so ingrained in the culture that you just feel it. And one of them is Undertale was definitely like that. And that's just a RPG maker kind of thing. And that one's still kind of legendary. And it's that's one funny too. There's like this era where it was right before all the SJW crap, and the SJWs kind of took that ball and ran with it. So it has all these things in common with the SJW crap. What's it called? Like on the surface level, just like it, like things you might be averse to if you've been uh, abused by the SJW shit, just messing with you over the years. You're like, I don't want like soy shit. Just like no, none of this soy bullshit. And you look at Undertale, you're like, it's kind of soy, kind of cutesy, kind of whatever. But that it was you got to remember like the eras. Like that was right before the SJW era, so that was like the pinnacle of that shit being good art. And then all that art styles were getting bastardized within the SJW system and kind of ruined. And then they have this like baggage that they carry with them. But at the time, you don't want it to go back and ruin stuff even earlier necessarily. Like it's still okay to enjoy the soy cutesy stuff. There was another era, like a few funny like eras we went through. We went through an era where like the super cheesy shit, I guess, like exploitation type stuff, and then titles that had verses in the middle. So it'd be like shark versus tornado, but like that something different. Like there was that zombie girl versus blah blah blah. Those were peaking around 2010, right before the SJW really took off. And I think the SJWs might have carried that over and ruined it. But there was the period right before where it had kind of peaked, and yeah, it is good. It's like a little dated and cheesy. Some of that era too, like that was an extension of the exploitation resurgence that Quentin Tarantino. I'm pretty sure he single-handedly started it with Kill Bill. That's another thing to kind of like try and remember is like you got to give him credit that like it was kind of cool that he did 3 crime movies, and then he did the craziest most off the wall thing that did start like a whole new genre. And arguably his crime movies started like a new genre, the Tarantino-esque thing, but no one ever really got it right of how they copied that except for him. But then, and even kind of same with the exploitation, but there was so many exploitation. Some of them were like decent. Like there's one called Hobo with a Shotgun. That's like, very much around and after Kill Bill. That one came out, and hundreds more. And it gets more and more weird and bastardized, and um, until it gets kind of finally like usurped and taken over by SJWs and kind of ruined slash like they just destroy the reputation of it. But if you go on the timeline, there was a period before that reputation was destroyed. Richie Dupe says Rutger, Hollywood commies. Sacrifices generally don't go well. It's not that easy to end someone. Yeah. One that is like sketchy? It's the dude, shit, what's his name? From that 70s show. He like found his girlfriend. And this is one that's like a little Occam's razory, like maybe it's not like a sacrifice for fame or whatever. But he like was going to go to a gala date with her, so we went to pick her up, found her dead, and then called his buddy, didn't know what to do, didn't know what the publicity of it would be, so then he pretended that he didn't find her, didn't call the police. The police found her later, And then he did have to go to the trial for that, like for her death and stuff. And then the story he told, which ended up being a lie, but he said he peeked in the window and saw her sleeping and there was some spilled wine on the carpet. This is like real. This is what he said. Like it's very sketchy just in that regard, even like. But I think the Occam's razor thing is like he actually was just worried about his career and he did like a really morally kind of terrible thing, and then lied about it, which kind of made it worse. But I maybe he didn't just put her up for on the chopping block to be his sacrifice for his fame. I'm not sure. Nevertheless, that shit is sketchy anyway. There was a serial killer who killed her too, which is kind of crazy. Um, and that's I'm pretty sure that's true. But who knows? I haven't played Undertale. The kind of people I can't stand like it too much. It makes me suspicious. Yeah, see, that's a little bit what I'm talking about. I don't know what because I didn't even explain that because that would be like because Undertale was like kind of like is usurped and taken over all the all the art style and everything, but then kind of ruined. But those people still see it as like perfect of what they like. Um, so yeah, it has like the wrong audience, but it's great though. The Game of Thrones dude is suing ChatGPT because they used it to finish his book because he is never gonna. That's funny. That's funny. AI is funny, guys. I don't know. I don't even hate AI. I think it's funny. It's like effing shit up for sure. But that's funny. But I don't know. Then yeah, there's shit where it's like that's not funny. I'm like, yeah, okay. Rutger. I saw Hobo as a part of double feature with Rubber. Yeah, Rubber is a fun one. I remember that movie. Jackie Brown doesn't count because it's from a book series. Yeah, I mean, you might not count it as a trilogy of crime films. Maybe it's a little bit different. Um, I know Tarantino, like he did three historical revision movies, so that's like a trilogy. And then he did three crime movies, and then he did three. He did no two Kill Bill and what's the car one? Um, shit, what's that called? Death Proof are exploitation. And then am I like missing one movie in there? Oh, frickin' there's one random western in there, Hateful Eight, uh, which is not exactly historical revision. Yeah, one odd man out. So I don't know if he's OCD and wants his like 10 movies to all like there's three crime films, three historical revisions, what else? Three exploitation and one random western. That would mean the last but the last movie is a 1970s movie about movies or something like that. I'm sure it will be good. I'm like ever so slightly mildly skeptical though. What's up, Chip? And the killer went on to kill again. Yeah, yeah. So if he would have like that could have been prevented if he would have done something. I think One Punch Man started a whole slew of mangas about overpowered powers. Yeah. Would that be are we counting like that as like a cool influential book? Um it's a funny idea. It's like it's a little postmodern, not in a bad way. Postmodernism isn't bad. Like all Tarantino stuff is postmodern, but that's another one the SJWs mess with it and ruin it. But just knowing a little bit of like some of the best Deadpool stuff, like Deadpool was kind of refreshing when it came out because we were so inundated with superhero movies. Then Deadpool came out and took the piss, and you're like, thank you. You've been saying what I've been thinking. Why do you like Nasser so much? Will you promote Creepsters 2 with him? Yeah, I'll promote it a little bit. I forget when it launches. Um, yeah, that's funny. I don't that those sentences are like different tone. I'm like, will you promote? I'm like, yeah, I'll promote. Why do you like him so much? I don't know. I'm like, it's like when people say they love comic books and their favorite is Saga. I just scream internally and find an excuse to leave. Yeah, I don't disagree, but when you say it's like, what is it like? What were we talking about when that came up? By the way, Saga's one that some people would list as like the coolest comic ever, where it is not. That is like not the coolest comic ever. That was freaking kind of like faked or whatever. Some of the how cool it was. I think that was the beginning of Brian K. Vaughan getting lazy too. I kind of don't think he was lazy for Why the Last Man, um, but Saga does not have the same narrative drive. Django was a Western. Yeah, but that's a historical revision one. I'd put that in that trilogy. But you're right, you could do a Western trilogy. And then Once Upon a Time in Hollywood has a movie within a movie that is a Western, so you could almost count that. Hateful Ape was landscape exploitation. The Jungle VIP. Woo Az. Oh, wrong chat. Donald Trump is postmodern. He can deconstruct it. That's true. That's funny. I don't know if he'd. Yeah, that's like a kind of funny statement that could somehow be turned into like a stand-up joke, but then nobody would laugh. I guess maybe people would laugh if you do it right. Shit, I forget you had said something about Undertale. Yeah, I need another coffee. I don't know what Saga is. That's Brian K. Vaughan's book, like after Why the Last Man, and it kind of bended the knee. Speaking of that term, bend the knee, I think in that case it bended the knee to like the SJW agenda, meaning it kind of implies he didn't want to do it but did anyway, like a coward. But I don't know if that's true. He might have done it like he wanted to. I don't know. What's up? What's up? We're still due for a little backer here. I'm going to update it. You guys can see it not go up. Look at this. 199. Oh, still 199. Oh, feel my pain. Feel my pain. So close. The thing is, we get one more backer, get to 200. Then we're super close to 12 thou. So we might hit that pretty soon. 20 thou is the big stretch goal. You get everyone gets the internet passcode, which don't you want to know what it is? And yeah, 20,000, I think realistic to reach. I'm always nervous about that. The way it's like you don't really know. You just never know how these things work. It's a little mysterious, the numbers game. Cuz you could do like math in your head to justify. You'd be like you're like there's 6 billion people on the earth. Like people see and know about this book. People like Narwhal, like Comic Skate. It's going to do 100K. And it's like no, 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 no. So then you're like, okay, okay, what's it going to do then? I don't know. It does 12K in 2 weeks. That's pretty good. Does that mean if it's open for whatever 4 months, it'll do 80K? Like whatever that math is? Like, no, that's not true either. You're like, shit. It's kind of slowing down. Does that mean it's going to stop to nothing and it'll just be at 12K forever? And that's it? 200 backers total? No, that's not it. Okay, somewhere in the middle. those are like the mind games you play. Comic book Saga is super cringe. Yeah, I think so. I particularly am incensed by Saga's supposed success a little bit because it is kind of a specific genre of sci-fi, which I think Earthbound also is. And there aren't that many examples. Like it's kind of original to do like I don't know, maybe I don't know if this is exactly true, but what is it like? It's like the kind of funny, kind of mixed with magic. version of sci-fi. Like maybe there's some anime that's like out there that's like it. Uh, like I don't know if there's a term called like fairy sci-fi. I don't know if that's a thing, but when I hear that, I'm like Earthbound's almost like that, but just like uh, yeah, like a more fun version of sci-fi, but a little bit different than Star Wars. You know, it's like a little bit more fun even than Star Wars. Star Wars is pretty fun, but then you're keeping it kind of serious and dark and slightly adult. But Saga and Earthbound are pretty similar in like that, what they're going for, the specific type of sci-fi, which is like you can really fine tune what you're going for. I think that's what people responded to Earthbound kind of for that reason too. They're like, because people tend to love sci-fi, but then you're like, yeah, what is the spectrum? You got like Alien or whatever. You got people on a ship, hard sci-fi, you know, realistic. They need oxygen and blah blah blah. Like that stuff's pretty awesome. Earthbound is not like that at all. Then you got like fantasy sci-fi, a little more like Star Wars. But then like what is like kind of adult fun sci-fi, kind of in some ways too like minimalist sci-fi where the sci-fi is not exactly the focus. Like a lot of Earthbound takes place in a high school, and once you set up the sci-fi rules, then it's just like a school shooting movie actually, or a school shooting story, which is its own little claim. See, that's an achievement unlocked. You know, I was telling you guys on a stream a while ago about video games have achievements like, and you can download lists that people make. You try and you do achievement hunting, and it'll be random shit you're trying to do. And I forget why this came up. Oh, I was saying because comics is a young art form, and we haven't hit as many achievements as you think. Like that it hasn't, it's not like movies. Even movies is a hit a little bit more. Comics hasn't been that fully explored. You Because even if you look at like say the best ever, like Frank Miller and Alan Moore, maybe what they've done is pretty specific. Like they know what they want to do. Frank Miller went a little bit all over the place in a good way in the 90s, but they both had kind of a thing they wanted to do, and they did it, and they explored it, perfected it, mastered it, expanded the art form, and showed us that direction where they kind of like pushed out this realm of the frontier of what's possible. But they only do it kind of specific for what they want, you know. So there's still a lot that could be done, and you can, one of the ways you can like think about it is achievement hunting. It's like, what are the achievements that you can hit that haven't been hit yet? One of them is like a comic about a school shooting that is like fun. Earthbound, yes, got it, got that achievement, give it to me. Another random one would be like a comic, uh what I was gonna say, hold on, I need a sip of coffee. Oh, a comic that takes place all in one night, but is 300 pages long. That's boom, achievement. Who's done that? That's Hotel Story, by the way. Part one is 124 pages, so it covers like 2 hours, and it's like boom, 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 boom. We're showing you what's happening on this crazy eventful night. Snuggy Jr., big eyes. My love for you is like a truck. Marvel DC industrialized the art form so only a select few could explore. They wanted time after time sales. Yeah, that, I wonder if that's the way you could explain why it didn't do what movies did. Like even movies, especially because of the period like in the 70s and 90s, there was like these independent movements where everyone was doing what they wanted to do and trying to explore shit. Um and those are very helpful. And if you don't get that, you can get, yeah, what's it called? You know, but yeah, you like, you get bones get brittle, and you don't get worked out and stretched. You don't get like spiders have to molt, you know. You don't get to molt. You gotta molt. Molt. You see, that genre of sci-fi fantasy is in a lot of older French, like some Valerian and Laureline or Mobius stories, maybe even Aldebaran, though the author Leo is Brazilian. That's cool. I don't disagree. I want to read some of those. You know, for me, one of my like biggest influences, it was Philip K. Dick. I read all his books in my 20s and I just loved them so much. I get goosebumps thinking about it. I was so into it. And I would keep like my crazy sci-fi ideas and I would write them down. I'm like, if I ever get to do a sci-fi, I'll show those people. I'll do one just as crazy as Philip K. Dick, and people won't be ready for it. Yes, sir. And so I was doing that, but Earthbound is not. I don't know. It was like all that gestated, and then Earthbound came from that, but it isn't even like it's not very Philip K. Dicky per se. But Earthbound Grand Prix, I actually think is like very Philip. It has Earthbound Grand Prix has like a ton of like off the wall kind of sci-fi ideas. And when I say a ton, I guess the main one is the rings and the reincarnation is like pretty kind of like Philip K. Dick type of weird idea that gets explored in weird ways. That's because almost like two things that have to happen. You have to have the weird idea, but then you also have to explore it in ways that people wouldn't see coming, kind of. But I revisited him a little bit later, like 20 years later, whatever, 15 years later, and it didn't blow me away anymore. So it is this thing where it hits you at a time in your life, blows your mind, and then that's kind of the role it serves. And from then, that's why it's weird to say like if you have all-time favorites, they're always kind of rotating. And sometimes my old favorites I actually might not really even like them at all anymore. Um, and for music and video games and movies, comics, but you remember that nostalgic period where you loved it and you really appreciate like the ways that it blew your mind at the time. And that's all like kind of cool. Uh, but yeah, I was gonna say one other thing, but I kind of forget. I've only read Electric Sheep. Which would you recommend next? Ubik is the best ever, Zed. Ubik is my favorite. Um, Ubik is like almost like a comic book style story. It's like psychics versus anti-psychics, and they both form like a CIA versus like IDF or whatever, like two intelligence agencies, and they that's like spycraft against each other. I actually kind of want to, and then on top of that is like the insane Philip K. Dick style shit is happening. I think he might get critiqued for some of his plots not being as good. I don't know. Flow My Tears, The Policeman is actually pretty fun though. Uh, yeah, Valis is good. Valis might be like a trilogy. I'm trying to remember. That's the one where the pink beam of light hits the guy, and that one's like I think the plot is like not. It's like takes place on Earth, and that in that respect there is some Philip K. Dick that's like crazy sci-fi stuff mixed with real just on Earth stuff. Well Red's here. What's up, Well Red? I like Ubik the best though. Too bad he didn't finish Man in the High Castle. Yeah. Yeah, Ubik has a crazy ending, but I liked that. I remember thinking, "Oh, that's fun." Simply Snuggie might have shouted out Ubik before I did. Sorry if I missed that, Snuggie. But yeah, I think of that without even like being prompted. Ubik is the number one book for from Philip K. Dick. Which is funny because it hasn't been adapted yet, I think. Maybe they finally did it. I kind of lost track of the adaptations because for a while they're adapting everything by him. And I don't know if they're not like super amazing necessarily. Each medium had its strengths. For comics, I think a lot of innovation lies untapped in panel and placement design. Yeah, that it could be true for show. I think there's a lot of potential in motion comics. Yeah. Sometimes I just want to kick back on a couch. Interesting. Yeah. Great minds think of dark. Is Scanner Darkly any good? Yeah. That one did get made into a movie, and I'm trying to remember because that's another one where like the plot, a lot of the plot is like them hanging out in the apartment, smoking pot, and just hanging out. And I'm like, what's the plot? Apparently, it's like a detective who's spying on a guy, but then he realizes he has multiple personality and he's been spying on himself. Like he is the detective who's chasing himself, something like that. And I remember the movie like kind of confusing me maybe and not even fully understanding that from the movie. And from the comic, from the book, it was a little more mind blowing and fun. It was just more, if that's like, if you get hooked into the Philip K. Dick mind blowing shit, then it's like, yeah, read that one too. He did a few too that were like pretty pulpy with not that much crazy stuff. Like, I think he did one that was like, there's just a teleporter that people go to get a life in paradise on like one of the moons of Mars, and you have to pay a certain amount to go into the teleporter. So people are saving up, getting teleported to Mars, and that's it. And some guy finds out that they're all being enslaved on Mars, which that plot, it almost makes you like roll your eyes. You're like, oh please. But at the time, it was like very original and fun, and it's like just this very simple pulpy story, and then he has to fight and free the slaves or whatever on Mars. I don't know. And all the books are like 180 pages or 220, between that. So pretty fast reads. I used to like those a little bit more like movies, which is why a lot of them might lend themselves to being adapted. Do Android Dream of Electric Sheep is actually really good too, and I think it's quite a bit different than the movie, in a kind of a fun way. I think. No Michael Ironside, so I checked out. Yeah. Shit. I kind of was meaning to draw a little bit, but I ended up just chatting for an hour. So I might hop off and draw on my own here in a second. Um, but yeah, it is good catching up and chatting with the chat. Chatting with the chat. We did get a backer. Let's look at this. Check this out. You guys want to see? If there's anyone in the chat who did that, thank you. Ooh, 200. 200. Look at that. We hit 200. Thank you so much. And 150, 155 away from 12 thou. So we'll hit that in due time. Thank you so much, everyone. Was it my hour-long ranting about sci-fi and Philip K. Dick that inspired you to support my work? Or would you have done it anyway? Student of God says you're welcome. Was it you, Student of God? Thank you, sir. Thanks for hopping by. I swear, streaming it, you can sell books that way. I think like it helps. I don't get like 100 viewers when I go live, but if I get some guests and try to put on a show, I can usually get at least 100. But just like 20 people hanging out, um, you can kind of let them know about your book, and because people kind of rotate and filter in, they'll check in because I have 2,500 subscribers, so people will be like, I haven't seen Gnarl in a while. They hop in the chat, they're like, oh, he's got a new book. This is what I think. I'm a little curious. I need to post, speaking of that, I need to post a community notes thing or whatever, community post on YouTube about Hotel Story, because I do think some of the YouTubers are not on Twitter, uh, and they would be interested. Well read. Chill hangouts like this are the best. Good chat interaction. I agree. It's fun. It actually isn't that slow to rewatch too. I'll rewatch if other people do it. I'm like, this is like decent little entertainment, nothing crazy. Student of God, I'm going to back the Dawg book on part 2. Yeah, thanks, man. That one's getting good reviews. Everyone's excited. I think part 2 could. I always say it. I always think this a little bit. I'm like, maybe that will be the one to crack 6 figs. Part 1 ended up just at like 34, 36 thou. But it got, everyone loves it. So, and Monica's art's amazing. Part 2 is an awesome ending too. The ending is, I think people will be pretty pumped about it. And so I'm looking forward to that. Snuggie, the Dawg book is really, really good. Thanks, Snuggie. Maybe I should just call it the Dawg book, because calling it Cerberus, based on the 3-headed dog that guards what Hades or whatever, the gates. there's Cerebus. So everyone always says Cerebus, and they're like, "Why did you steal Cerebus' name?" I'm like, "No, no, 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 no. Cerberus, the dog, three-headed dog. This is a dog story, three-headed dog. You know what I'm saying?" But I'm like, just the dog book, Narwhal's dog book. Student of God, I set you up with that Mark Miller tweet. Yeah, thanks. Um, I think yeah, you're hooking it up. I do appreciate it. Uh, dog book, great concept. Doggos FTW for reals. For reals. Yeah. So yeah, we got that backer. That's sweet. 150 more. We get to 12 thou. I don't know. Maybe I'll reload my coffee and see if we can get one more backer. There's still some random stuff I want to chit chat about maybe. Student of God, your response was weak. Oh, that's funny. Um I can't remember what yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I'm self-conscious about bugging him too much, but I at the same time that's what I think that if you could pick one or the other, it's always they need to know about your existence and everything. But he and I, we do chit chat a little bit behind the scenes, just here and there. So yeah, I appreciate the shout outs and stuff. Fluke by James Herbert is an interesting dog novel. Yeah, that got turned into a movie, I think. I forget what it's about though. Guy turns into a dog or something and becomes his like family's dog, hanging out with his ex-wife or wife or whatever. Should have asked for his address to send it to him. I would do that in like DMs or emails, but I probably won't mess with it publicly. I guess. I don't know if the other thing. I just almost feel like he's so busy, and I feel a little self conscious of being like, read my book, and then I'm like, did you read it? I have done that with him a little bit. Like I think he's read Foreign Agent, and I think he really liked it. I sent him a short story that he read, Robozan, and that's what he gave me a quote. He said, and it's on the back of the shorts compendium, my short story collection book. His quote said, "This guy is absolutely the best storyteller in comics right now," which is kind of hilarious. It's hilarious how like ridiculous it is. But I asked him to. I was like, "Can I put that on the back of the book?" He said, "Are you kidding? Absolutely." I was like, "What? Thank you." Uh, yeah. Willard, what's your thoughts on Brave New World? That's the sci-fi book. Is it by Aldous Huxley? Was that one like written in the 30s too? Sometimes it's always interesting when they're written. I'll be right back though. I'm gonna get coffee. Check. Is it going? Yeah. Well Red says, yeah, that's the one. Yeah, I remember loving that book. That's another one that's short. I like all the ones that are like 200 pages or whatever. I don't know if that one's gotten made into a movie, but it definitely could be. I think if it kind of feels almost like if that one got it made into a movie, it would hit too close to home. It would like hurt too many people's feelings, so no one wants to make it. That was definitely a pretty prescient one, I think too. Is that the right word? Pretty guessing right about the future almost. What's the time in Miracle Land? 5 p.m. Yeah, it's 4:30 where I am in the Pacific. It's winter, so the sun is lower on the horizon, so it shines right through my window. But I hung up a sheet, so it looks kind of hobo-y, but it works pretty nice. Damn, I took my coat off and I was a little too hot with it on, and now I'm a little too cold with it off. Don't you guys hate that? Let me see. What was I don't know. Well, hotel story. 18 people watching. But yeah, we're wonderful. Get one more backer. One more, maybe two. It'll probably take two or even three to get us to 12,000. I don't know if we'll get that this stream. Succulent announces quite gay. Which authors do you think most inspire your storytelling now? That's a pretty good question. I don't know. It's more movies that inspire me now. But for authors, I'll read books and I'm like, oh damn, that was a good one. But I don't know, I think I haven't read like a nice fiction novel in like a year. The last one I read, it might have been Flashman. I read three of those, that series from George MacDonald Fraser, and those are like borderline pulpy too. And there was a movie made, but I started it, but it wasn't as good. But those are great. Um, and those are, I think, are classics. A lot of these you hear in certain circles, people will speak them, and you're like, oh yeah. But yeah, like I'm ashamed to admit Stephen King was a huge influence. Um, but I definitely grew out of him and can't stand him anymore. Although his books, I'm sure they're probably still good, but his tweets are just so stupid. And so I think some of his like newer stuff, I'm like pretty skeptical that it's good. But the one that I read from him that was really inspirational, it was the first Dark Tower book, which is apparently the book he wrote when he was 18, because there is a very youthful energy in that book. And it's like that one, speaking of like sci-fi fantasy, that one has its own thing going on where it kind of feels quite a bit different than like it's not Star Wars, it's not Lord of the Rings. Like what is it? I think part of what it is like he's making up the world building as he goes and not explaining anything, and it feels really cool. Like I remember loving that, and that's I kind of do that with Earthbound. But there's one thing in that Dark Tower, the first Dark Tower book, it's like he needs to keep like the pelvic bone of a cow somehow wards off like evil spirits. And so he just keeps it with him at all times. But then something happens where it kind of gets used up and crumbles, or it breaks, or a thief steals it. And then he has to deal with a freaking witch kind of coming out of nowhere and like casting a spell on him. It's been a while since I read it, but that was like sort of like, so the plot is like him carrying a special bone for no reason that you don't know why. He loses it and then gets fucked by a spell temporarily. I'm like, that is awesome. I love that. Herbert was a conservative and is now deceased. I want to read Fritz Lever's Lankmar novels, but they're long out of print and are proving annoying to find. Which King books did you like? Oh yeah, that one. And I read one from him called Cell that I really liked, but that was like a little later Stephen King. That was like maybe right kind of that era too, right before things got all SJW. D Barry says Flashman is hilarious. Yeah, that one. I wonder. Some of this is like you can try and guess what they're bringing to the table. It is like it's like the metaphor of like cooking or whatever. Like how much humor do you want? How much adventure? How much fun? How much randomness? How much realism? How much high stakes? How much like intensity? And you're like sprinkling it all in there. Everyone has like a concoction that they prefer. And you can do that within sci-fi or fantasy or historical fiction or whatever. And Flashman is a very nice concoction. It's very like high adventure, very, and maybe that's like kind of classic. Like it's like trying to think of because I don't know. There are movies that are like that. There's a famous one called Gunga Din, which is based on like a short story by the dude who wrote Jungle Book, and then the movie's black and white movie. It's about the British in India, and it's almost like an early Indiana Jones kind of thing. It's like treasure hunting, the Indian cult where they go Kalima and they like try and eat you and sacrifice you and shit. They have to fight them, um, and they have to like. There's like pretty fun action, very swashbuckling. You could is a word. So yeah, like Flashman is Flashman is like swashbuckling mixed with a kind of hilarious amount of not political correctness, which is still refreshing even today. That level, um, and I don't know. Just thinking of it makes me want to read it again or read another one. I read Bag of Bones and hated it. Pet Cemetery is good. Yeah, I bet Pet Cemetery is good. Stephen King, another weird thing about him is if you watch his interviews, you might end up hating him depending. He's like so smug. And I wonder if smugness passes into the SJW kind of thing. Like that's like it's like a gateway to the cowardice of the embracing of the SJW agenda later in life as an old man. A youthful smugness uh, will turn into that. Zed, what's Fritz Lieber's Lankmar? I might be a little curious about that. But yeah, for books, the last year, I've just been reading fairy tales. I got a couple collections, and they're pretty inspiring too, and they're a lot of fun. But they're it's I don't know that there are ones that kind of stick with you, but nothing's gonna blow your mind. I think one thing I was saying too is the actual mind blowing experience. I remember that happening all the time from like the ages of 18 to like 27. I swear my mind was getting blown like constantly. And now it doesn't happen that much anymore. I'm like, when was the last time my mind got blown? I don't know. I feel like Frank Miller's Daredevil blew my mind a little bit. I was like, this is so good. Uh Maybe from movies, there's some movies that kind of Interstellar might have blown my mind a little bit. But that was like 2015 or something. 2016, I don't know. That was a long time ago. Oh, and Tarantino's new movie maybe could almost count. Uh, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood was a little bit mind blowing. That scene where Brad Pitt on Spawn Ranch walking to say hi to his old friend. I was like, how did he do that? How is that scene half hour just the best shit ever? That's one too where the story there is no story. You know, like I almost think like movies shouldn't tell stories. That's like a crazy thing to say. it's not exactly true. And then I'm wondering if you do that with comics too. Like, what if the story isn't even your goal? Like, the goal is to like create some suspense or whatever. Just like the goal is to like have an emotional response. But beyond, because there's two kinds of responses the audience can have. It can be like the emotional where they just feel sad or whatever. They feel angry. There's that, and they do like that. But the other weird one is you can make them feel suspense, on the edge of their seat, give them that feeling. That's like the one I'm the most interested in. The motion one's good too, though. And then maybe there's even like a third, which kind of could be either of these, but that's when you make them feel something that they don't even know what they're feeling. And the metaphor for that is, I remember it's like unidentified. It's like you used to find, and if you play Diablo, the old game from the 90s, you're running around the dungeon and you're killing monsters and they're dropping weapons and you pick them up. Once in a while, you get an unidentified weapon. And that means you have to take it back to town or use a scroll of identify, but take it back to town to get it identified. You pay the guy who knows, then he tells you what it is. And that whole process of like, it takes extra work to understand the unidentified emotions. And that'll be like, I think Kubrick does that a lot, where you're like, I don't even know what that movie made me feel. It was not sad, happy, whatever the emotions. What are the emotions? What are the basic emotions? Is there like four or five of them? Like, but anyway, one of those though that is like unidentified is badass. It's when you go, that was fucking badass. And they're like, what was badass about it? What do you mean by badass? You're like, I don't know. And like that's what movies can do. But yeah. But yeah, it's a funny this is speaking of like the achievement hunting or something. It's like that that's one way to approach movies and comics that I am almost on this road or whatever, but it is it's less about the story. Like honestly, a hotel story is almost like that, where because the you can pitch it in one sentence. Like so, the story is not that much of a thing. The story is the witch casting a mass sacrifice spell from the top floor suite. Chaos ensues, and then like yeah, a lot of shit happens, and you could say that's the story. It's like what people do to survive. It's also like a lot of times it boils down to who knows what when. So you're just tracking the information as people are learning and able to deal with the problem, identifying the problem. Star Trek episodes can be like that, but like demystifying like the story of like trying to be. I feel like it can be sometimes intimidating if you're like, what's the story? How do I think of a good story? What's a fun story? It's like, bro, you don't even need to tell a story. Nobody gives a shit. The story is Brad Pitt walking to say hi to an old friend. Like that's through like a cult basically, and he doesn't know they're a cult, and that's the story. And actually, when I say story, what that is a scenario, and that's what they used to call writers in Hollywood. They call them scenarists, and they would be the scenario writer. They never used the word script. They would always, what's the scenario? And that approach is another one where I'm like, I like that. I want to be that guy who in comics who I'm just trying to think of scenarios instead of stories. Then you'll get like, because you wouldn't even tell, you can tell a story if it's like a good little story and people will like it, but for a scenario you wouldn't tell it unless it's like great. Like it has to have the interactivity, the magic going on, of the suspense, or the unidentified emotion, or maybe identified emotion, or the other one is a psychological angle. That's always like pretty fascinating. The one we were talking about it on stream just yesterday, but if people ask me like, what do you think about this? And I go, well, I'm of two minds, and I'll describe both thoughts and they're literally opposites. Like that's kind of an interesting psychological thing that happens a lot. Like people are aware of opposites and feel opposites constantly. That I kind of almost want to try and explore that with like my next script. I want to think of like like this is how people can contradict themselves, how people can act against character sometimes. Because I think that's possibly a little bit of a problem that we have right now with modern art is people think of a character and they're like, this is Jezebel de Zemina, and she is spunky, happy, and she really wants to get into college. And she likes this kind of toothpaste. She likes her coffee this way. She has an old teddy bear that she really likes, blah, blah, blah. And they know everything about her. So they write a story about her and they're like, well, because of my formula that I have over here, let me consult it. She would act this way. And then you do that. I'm like, yeah, but what if Jezebel de Zemina is having a bad day? And deep down, she's had a sense of fate that she knew that she was gonna like burn her teddy bear long ago. She did it. And what if she just burns her teddy bear, And what if she like slaps her little sister? I don't know. That's something that it's like a real life concept that plays into stories, but it's the concept of fate. But what one thing it is it's kind of loosely related to, in some ways it could be like addiction, or it's like something that we know deep down. So like the fate thing, like we know deep down, like I don't know, like if you have an addiction you haven't broken yet, and you might be on a streak of not partaking of the addiction, you know deep down that you're going to partake at some point, but you don't know when it will be. And then there's a beautiful moment where if you actually do break it, sometimes you do know that, and then you're free. And that's like very rare. It happens once in your life from breaking an addiction. For me, like one example is like drinking or whatever. But yeah, you have all these failed attempts, and you just know you have a sense of your fate, and the right in the middle of it, this isn't the streak that's going to be the one that's going to go forever. And that's like a weird feeling. And then like that's the thing that pulls you back down to just knowing that it's not the end. Um, that allows you to flip and literally do the opposite of what you've been saying you've been trying to do. I know sometimes if people say opposites, if they say I'm of two minds, and they say on the one hand I love him and on the other hand I hate him. Um, it's like that's like interesting. People might say that about Trump or something, and you're like, okay, in one, is it that you're lying for one of them and telling the truth for one, or are you literally telling the truth, or are you tracking your brain over like a couple days, and you're like, well, I'm aware over the past days I've had two thoughts. One was positive, one was negative. I'll share them both with you now. Um, I don't know. And then it gets pretty complicated if you mix it with two people together. That's like this is something I have not mastered at all. I'm like trying kind of hard to figure it out, but that's when dialogue actually gets good, is when it has the psychological stuff going on. Because one thing I did figure out is if dialogue has the interactivity, then it actually doesn't even matter what they're saying. Like if it's like suspense, like the way Hitchcock says, if there's a bomb under the table and two people are talking, that is actually an easy scene to write because it doesn't matter what they say. They can say anything, and that's kind of fun. Um, that's like the beginning of Pulp Fiction, like where they're on their way to do a hit, and you're sticking around because you need to see this happen. But you'll listen to them talk as they're doing it, and you're pretty fascinated. They can have fun conversation, and you're into it because you know it's going somewhere. If they had a feeling like it wasn't going somewhere, you actually might get bored and be like, I'm not going to watch a whole movie of these guys talking about their trips in Europe or whatever. Uh, but it's not like that, so it does work. But so that is doable. But then the other one that I'm trying to think of, like where you see it. I think it's in the opening scene of The Social Network, which is a kind of famous opening scene. But there is pretty intense psychological mind games almost happening uh, as they're talking, and that's when you're like, oh, this is good dialogue. And that's one way. So you can define subtext as like multiple things. It's like subtext can be the innuendo, which is the weakest, dumbest stuff. It's almost cringy sometimes, the innuendo. the secret meaning or whatever, the coded stuff. That's the first way I learned about subtext too. Then I learned about interactivity, where it's like, yeah, bombs under the table. So the audience is tracking two things. So there is like this thing beneath the words. The words are not what the scene's about. So that's like a subtext. That is awesome. Anytime you can get that going, you want to. There's a third type of subtext that is pretty hard also, where it's like a psychological warfare mind game frame battle where people are actually jockeying with each other over either dominance or ideas or whatever, where they're trying to kind of manipulate each other slightly, but just how they're talking, and the words they're using and choosing, and the social kind of cues that they're picking up and leaving and taking and playing off of. That kind of stuff is really fascinating and fun if you get it just right. And that's the one I'm still learning. It's pretty hard. Like returning the pants that you're wearing. F in the chat. Have you ever had a feeling something bad was going to happen, ignored it, and then something bad happened? Yeah, what they call that Murphy's Law is one thing. And I definitely I like try to go by Murphy's Law. I'm like, shit, dude. Something could go wrong, so it will. Have you ever watched Barton Fink? It's a lot like what you're describing. Um, is that where it's about the scenario? Is that I forget what I was describing when you said that well read? I think I saw it a long time ago. I want to rewatch it. It's about a writer, and it's a Coen Brothers movie. How do you know when the scenario ends? I don't know. It's not a bad question. I think it would have a beginning, middle, and end, and it would have that arc to structure to a climax. And once the climax is over, then you kind of get out of there. Because that is a thing about stories, is they are fractal. Whereas like this arc of the arcing to the climax and then kind of getting out of there. That's true of long stories. It's true of short stories. It's true of scenes. It's true of shots, which isn't even a scene. Like a Spielbergian shot will even do that, where it kind of teases, reveals, and gets out of there. Something like that. Oh, very psychological and unsettling. Nice. No, I want to watch that. I'll check that out. Yep. Cool. Well, now I'm thinking about getting out of here. One of these days I might try and do like a writing vlog thing or something. Chit chat about some scripts I want to write or something like that. But I'm kind of in drawing mode right now anyway. I've got some books I got to draw, figure out, and get some more scripts going. But yeah, thanks everyone for hanging out. Back hotel story. We're close to 12,000. So close. We cracked 200. That's awesome. Thank you so much. Yeah, pretty excited. And yeah, can't wait to get this one out. Everyone's gonna love it. It's just a lot of fun. Speaking of when I was saying like the concoction of mixing, like how much humor, how much fun, how much randomness, how much seriousness, how much whatever, how much badassness, how much gore, how much, if it's horror, a little bit different ingredients you might throw in there. But Hotel Story is a very fun mixture. Me and Jared fine tune that shit to get, and I think it's a little bit original. Like that's one of the ways you get. Oh, I haven't really read something that feels quite like this. Anytime you can get high stakes and humor, that's like a hard thing to do because humor will inevitably destroy stakes. The more of it you have, the less stakes you can have, and that's a classic thing with Marvel. Like Marvel kind of put in too much humor, destroyed the stakes, and ruined the brand a little bit. But getting it just right, getting some of the humor in there, but still having like the life and death, whatever, people like really going for what they need, going for what they want. And then will they fail or won't they? A lot of times the things that keep us turning the page and watching, it's if it's yeah, like if it's working on its most basic primal level, it's like a question of yes or no, like fail state or success state. Will they or won't they? I got to see what happens. Are they going to make it? How are they possibly going to make it in this situation? They're totally screwed. I got to keep reading. Got to keep watching. Whatever. That's kind of definitely some of my favorite kind of stuff when it's like that. Setting up just that simple. It's all about that simple shit. Um, yeah. Steak should be medium rare. Everyone jump over to Diaz Bros with Gnarl Lens. Yes, definitely. Do the Diaz Bros. Cool. I'll catch you guys later. Thanks so much.